so we have a record of this. So we'll have to start recording now, and it's 5 o'clock, so let's get started. And I welcome everyone. I'm sure we'll have a few folks coming in now. I think by way of introduction, I should mention that as of today, we have 91 boats that have applied to participate in the Salty Dog Rally this fall. About 3 months ago, to a somewhat incredulous group of board members, I said, I think we're going to break 100. And they're like, okay, we'll see. And here, last year we had 82. Previous year, another COVID year, we had about 60, I think, in the prior year before that, in the same neighborhood of 80 boats. This is very much could very well be a record year for us. And I think in part because a lot of people, I think, reassessed their lives during the pandemic and figuring you only live once, we're going to the Caribbean. So, and I was on the phone the other day with one of our primary supporters down there, and they have close ties to the UK, and things are pretty tough there with their energy crisis and so forth and so on. And she said, do you think that people are going to stay home because of these things? And I said, no, I think there's more people are going to go to the Caribbean because they've seen what life can be like at home, and they want to try something they've been planning and dreaming about for their whole life. So we now have, of that group, we have over 20 boats that have been invited to participate in this mentoring program. So this is a big opportunity for us and also for you. And certainly as we, this is our the third time we've done this with you folks. And as we get further along, and I think we're going to move to an alternate week schedule every other week, what we're going to do is ask you as we go further along to assess how this is working, because we put a lot of energy into this. We have dozens of volunteers that participate. And just for example, Tim, who handles communication, is going to probably address this at our next meeting. And that's things in terms of the Iridium Go and the Garmin InReach and Spot and so forth for staying in touch with folks on shore. That can be a little bit of a head scratcher. And Tim manages, along with his shoreside support people, to keep everyone safe as we possibly can offshore and to make sure everybody's communicating. So anyway, I'm going to get started and ask Tatcha to give a few updates.
All right. So as Bob mentioned just a few minutes ago, I posted the link to the welcome page in the chat box. We haven't made any major changes recently, but I did update the participant directory today, so that's pretty up to date. It is changing pretty fast, as Bob said. We're getting new registrations, but we are working hard in the background to get more details on that page, and we'll let you know as they're there. We hope that you would go there first if you have some questions. It saves us some time. You could probably get the answer faster than emailing us, because we're getting more and more bogged down with emails. So lots of information there. Go there. If you don't find it, come to us and ask more questions. I think that did you want me to cover anything else, Bob, before?
I think that kind of covers it. Anytime you have questions, you just reach out to myself or to Tatcha or both. Pretty much any email I send out, I copy Tatcha on it because as our virtually full-time executive director, this is what she focuses on, and I certainly focus on it a lot every day. But it's exciting stuff.
I thought of one more thing. So we are starting to look at your safety information, your waivers. So the place to go to update any of that information is also on the welcome page. So if you didn't quite know, what your, EPIRB number was when you signed up and you need to enter it now, go there and you can add it in. So either, I will start sending out reminders that, we were missing information from you, or you'll be hearing from Kevin, who helps us out with this. So keep an eye out for those emails.
And to the point about things like your EPIRB and so forth, Tim, who's going to join us in 2 weeks, Tatcha has sent information to him, and he's probably already contacted most of you, if or not, you'll have heard from him very soon as the person responsible for comms. Do everything you can to help get that information squared away. In particular, after all the years I've been involved, I purchased an Iridium Go last summer. And I will say it was a little bit of a learning curve to get that thing squared away. And every year we have people that are literally leaving the dock or talking to us on their sat phone, trying to figure out how to configure that stuff. And with Iridium and Predict Wind and offshore email and so forth, there's 4 individual apps that work on either a phone or a tablet that you have to master before you can even do it. And because it's not an inexpensive thing to use in the full configuration, about $150 a month, people tend to wait until they're about to head offshore. But keep in mind that the first month you use it, it's a pro rata. So if you start it 2 weeks ahead of time, you're only paying for half the month. And then if you turn it off once you're in the Caribbean, if you decide to do that, you can start it up just by having an extra SIM card. So those are the kind of details that you just don't want to do as you're heading out offshore. That is really, really challenging. So Phil, thank you, Tatcha. If anything else comes up, just fire off a note or pop back on. But thank you and have a good evening.
You too. Take care.
So Rick may have to leave a little before the end of the meeting, and so I've asked him to talk a little bit about weather right up front, in particular about GRIBs, and that applies not only to the old sort of weather facts approach, but to the Predict Wind, which actually we're going to talk about at our next discussion, once we talk about comms, just because I think we've got plenty to talk about tonight. Rick, you want to give that one a stab?
Sure. A couple of things. For those of you who we can't see on here, remember to turn on your video, which is down on the lower left-hand side of your screen next to your microphone. We've got a bunch of you that we know you're there, but we can't see you. And the other thing we would like everybody to do is mute your microphone until we get, until you have a question, until you recognize, because thank you guys for coming up. I appreciate that. One of the problems that we have is we get a lot of background noise going on. So we've got, I don't know, 8 or 10 of you up here. There comes some more people up now. How many of you still use single side, are planning to use single sideband to get weather offshore? Anybody? Or am I just so far in the background that a little bit? Okay. I thought I would talk for a minute or a couple of minutes about weather faxes, because they are available to you, and you can download them any way you want. You can get them sent to you electronically every morning at a set hour, and you can do that by going up on www.weather.gov and looking for marine faxes. And there's if you keep scrolling down in there, you'll find that you can get faxes every day. You can get them sent to you automatically. They are free, but it does require, if you're going to do this, it requires that you start to learn a fair amount about weather. Now, I attached 2 very basic faxes. This is what you get to the email or to the agenda today. Has anybody ever seen these weather faxes like this? Is anybody familiar with them? Okay. A little bit, Don? Okay, John? Weather fax is really, it's what they think the surface analysis is right now, which is what I did, an Atlantic surface analysis, which is the first one that I sent out, or the first one that I attached. And that's good on August 8th, is valid on August 8th at midnight, last night. And that fax, as you can see, it shows a number of different weather features. It shows some lows. Up in the upper right-hand corner, it shows a low. The arrow there indicates that the low is moving off to the northeast, which we've talked about before. This is the direction that lows move. And you can see the associated warm front and cold front with it. You can also see that there's a fair amount of wind out there. If you look just below that, the low pressure center, you'll see a Beaufort flag down there with 3 full arrows on it, and each, which indicates really a fair amount of wind. That would be 30 knots of wind down there. You can see the Bermuda High sitting off the east coast of the United States. You've got to get used to looking at the United States. You can see Florida stick down there. You can see the Bahamas trailing down from Florida off to the left. I'm sorry, off to the right. And you can see that we've got 20 knots of wind down in the Caribbean or in the South Atlantic just prior to getting into the Caribbean. You can see that you've got a couple of more highs coming off the East Coast. The numbers in there indicate the millibars of those highs. So you can get some idea. We'll go back up to that low in the upper left-hand corner, right-hand corner. That's 989 millibars. That's a pretty deep low. And that indicates that you're going to have an awful lot of wind if you see something like that. And these come out every day, and you can get them downloaded once a day, or you can download them twice a day if you want. And if you do decide to use faxes, one of the things that I do when I use them is keep them, so that I've got a record of it. I can look back at yesterday's fax and see what they thought that low was going to do, and then see what it actually did. They're saying that this one is going to move off towards, I guess that's actually towards Norway up there. And you can see if that really did that, and how the associated trailing cold front, and then it's out into an occluded front where it's warm on one side. That's if you trace that back, you'll pass a high, you come to another low, and then all of a sudden you see that you've got the little sawtooth edge coming down showing a cold front, and on the other side you've got the little half moon, which shows that it's warm on that side. And then a couple of more lows that are going to travel along that front. So that's basically what a weather fax looks like. And we can go over this in more detail at another time. Grid files take all of the analysis out of this for you. And when you download a grid file from Predict Wind, which is what I think you guys should start doing. And frankly, I would start doing it earlier rather than later. And yes, I know it's $100 or something like that, or $50 for the month. But you guys are doing a trip that you've waited all your life to do. And you know, $50 to begin to understand weather and see how weather comes to you is really a pretty small price to pay to be comfortable offshore when you're reading these files and you begin to understand them. The other weather fax that I sent you is a little bit more difficult for people, because people are not used to looking at this. And this is a 500 millibar fax. It's about 18,000 feet in the air. It's where the jet stream goes through. And if you look at that other forecast, it's a 500 millibar forecast. And this one happens to be for August 7th, 22, valid 1200, August 7th, 22. And it's run off the GFS model, which is a computer model that the Weather Service uses. And if you look right below that heading, you can see that the jet stream is running across there really fast. The flag is 50 knots. On the weather arrows. So that's running across there at 60 knots. And this is what drives all of the weather that's underneath it. And if you're going to start to look at weather faxes, I think that a couple of things would be useful. And I indicated on the piece with the agenda that Chris Parker has got a really, really neat book out. That's $30. You can order it from his website. And it really begins to introduce you to what's going on here and how weather moves across the United States and what the effect is going to be on you as these fronts come through. At 18,000 feet, you've got lows and highs. And you can see that this jet stream is fairly consistent across the United States, or at least as much as we can see. And that jet stream, as we go into the fall, will start to move down south. And this is what brings the weather pattern, the highs and the lows alternating so quickly when about November, when we're getting ready to leave. And if you begin to understand that and you can see that, then you can also follow this on grid files. There is one more feature I would want to point out to you, and you'll see in the middle of the jet stream, there's a very, very dark line, and that's 560 millibars. That's where that line goes through. And this has an interesting benefit for you. If that line is above you, the chances of you having a gale of more than 35 knots are relatively low. If that line is below you, the chances of you having a gale over 35 knots increase substantially. And this is one of the reasons this line will move down and it will sort of oscillate back and forth through New England at about the time we're leaving. And I know that Bob has talked with a number of people about leaving, the difference in leaving from Hampton versus the difference in leaving from Newport, Rhode Island, or Newport, Rhode Island. And the position of this 560 millibar line can often sit over New England at that time in the year. And it's what makes leaving from Hampton, Virginia, a better choice for a lot of people. So I know I ran through that fairly quickly, and I did that because we've got a lot of questions about medical kits and what's going on and how to get SEP squared away in Hampton with dock space and whatnot. So I'll go through this pretty quickly. Anybody got any questions on what I've gone over?
Rick,
Is
I'd
it
like to
meaningful
just,
to you?
I want to add something to what you've just said. Then
Yeah.
Don has a question. We're in the process right now. Alex is actually the guy who handles all of our webinars. What we're doing with you is special to you, but we have more general discussions for anyone involved in the rally, all 100 boats. And those will be, you'll be receiving an announcement of those, and they will include, and not be limited to, a discussion from Chris Parker going into an hour of detail or more of some of the things that Rick just highlighted. You know, what we're trying to make the point tonight is this is not something you want to wait until the last minute. I can still remember vividly the first time I was about to head offshore, which was actually quite a bit before I ever did the run to the Caribbean. And I had met Chris Parker, and I thought there is no chance I am ever going to understand this weather. And I still can't say I'm an expert at it, but Chris will give you some pretty good guidance. And I would second the recommendation to buy his book. It is, when you're finished reading it, pass it off to a friend. It's the only book I've ever read on weather that I found to be approachable. Most of them are just completely overwhelming. We're also going to be doing a session, and I want to about predict wind. That'll probably be part of our next discussion. Now, when Rick says subscribe now, what in particular we're recommending is if you're going to use predict wind, and I encourage you to explore that. That gives a very good graphic representation of the kind of information you get in text form from Chris Parker. And it's always a good idea and very helpful to be able to look at that information from Chris. And I sent an example of that to you today, just to give you a feel for it. It's a lot, very dense information. You're going to get something similar to that, but tailored specifically to where you are. Like there'll be a clump of Salty Dog rally boats between 21 north and 65 west or something. And you're going to have to interpret when he says, I want you to head for a point of X. And then the next day, he might very well say, forget that point. The weather just changed. I want you to do this. I mean, not always, but sometimes. And I will tell you that being able to download the information of predict wind and look at it graphically, or to look at the grids or the isobars and that information that Rick is providing information on, that will give you a very clear sense of a much clearer sense of what Chris is talking about. To sign up for Predict Wind, I think it's a couple $100 a year, whether you sign up now or November, you've got a year. And you won't need all of the features of your Iridium Go if you use that or some other form, a way to download the Predict Wind data. You won't need that until a few weeks before you head offshore. So, and then of course, Chris Parker has 6 days a week. He does webinars in the morning and often at 5 o'clock at night, talking about weather on the East Coast and the Eastern Caribbean and the Bahamas at each individual time. And you can watch those and even get recordings of them. And as you think of it as a seminar for $300 a year that you could watch every day practically, it's very, very worthwhile. And Randy and Sue posted a note, isn't there a limited version of Predict Wind that's free? That is true. So I would explore that, but ultimately, if you're going to use it offshore, you should sign up for the full service. What Predict Wind gives you in the paid version is a routing tool, so that you put in your polars or information about how your boat operates under certain conditions, and it will plot out a recommended route based upon the current weather information. Now you have to take that with a grain of salt, and we'll explain that and why next time we meet. But in the decade that I've been doing this, the resources available are just tremendously better. And I think, sure, that it sees further out into the future. You know, it used to be a couple of days is all you could get. Maybe now it's more like 5 or 6. But the big benefit for me of getting something like Predict Wind is that it gives me more confidence in what I'm seeing. And I will tell you that many times over the years that I get an email from Chris and I'm reading it and I'm going over it with my crew and I'm having a little difficulty getting my head around it and having a graphic representation as Rick has described, or through Predict Wind, it makes it just a lot easier, because sometimes the rules are just a little bit unclear and they change, day to day. And so back to Rick on the questions about what he just talked about.
Don, you had a question?
Yes, I did. On this, the marine facts off of weather.gov, has anyone had that sent via email to the Iridium mailbox, and does it work or?
Yep.
Or...
I didn't use Iridium. I used another sat phone system, but I've had it sent to my sat phone and it works quite well.
Okay, I'll give that a shot tomorrow.
I think it's worth doing. I've mentioned before that I've also a pilot, and I'm kind of weather centric. So I like getting in the middle of all of this. And I would very strongly recommend that 2 or 3 weeks before we go, you guys really start watching the weather, and you need to get into I think you need to get into the rhythm of it, so that you can see what's coming and begin to understand what you're going to deal with offshore. I'm going to actually stop because Bob has covered some of the stuff that he wanted to with Chris Parker, but I know he wants to go over those, over Chris's forecast. And I would also say that using Chris's forecast, Chris's routing directions with you, Predict Wind, and I would spend the money to get the full version of Predict Wind rather than the free version of it. But it's up to you. But I would use both of those things, or 3 of those things, to help make decisions, because it's your decision where you are and what's going on where you are. And sometimes what's going on where you are has absolutely nothing to do with the forecast. A little low starts up, or you get a couple of thunderstorms coming through, and you need to be able to make decisions about where you are and what you would like to do. And for me, 2 or 3 different things that you can sit and chew on. And a friend of mine's got a statement about chewing gum for the mind. And I think, weather is one of those things. So with that, I'll stop. And Bob, you want to pick it up with Chris
Yes.
Parker's forecast?
Yes, just a comment, follow on to what Rick just talked about. Over the last few years, using the Iridium in particular last fall, and then listening to what people had experienced in the prior year, the Iridium, one of the things to keep in mind about weather faxes or the Iridium GRIBs and so forth and so on from Predict Wind is they're not managed by a real person. You know, they're generated by computer models, and as the models change, the forecast changes, and they don't necessarily combine the upper level things that Rick described with the surface weather, and they are interconnected. So for example, 2 years ago, the Predict Wind said, basically you leave Hampton and do a rum line to Antigua, more or less, which takes you just to the east of the British Virgin Islands, and then you turn south. And for people that followed that, they ended up being headed as they got down closer to Puerto Rico, and some of them could not make enough easting to get around the islands. And the reason for that is that there was something appearing in the upper level that was going to push a ridge out in front, but the GRIBs in the 6-day GRIBs didn't show that. And so the Predict Wind model didn't know, but Chris could tell based upon the upper level information he was looking at that this was likely to happen. And I've personally had other experiences where you need a meteorologist to interpret that. So in a nutshell, when you get GRIB files, when you get Predict Wind, you're getting raw data that is basically, maybe there's a little AI mixed with it, but primarily it's just whatever the computer spits out. And there are multiple models. There's the GFS, which is the US model, and there's the Euro, which is the European model. And there's the Euro has, maybe more often than not, is ahead of the GFS in terms of accuracy because they've invested a lot more money in it. And Chris and Predict Wind, you can look at both of those models. But the point is, as Rick has pointed out, you just don't want to rely on any single thing. And there is nothing really more important than having a handle on weather when you're 500 miles from land, because you can't leave it. Not to belabor the point, but being in the wrong place at the wrong time can mean the difference between 15 knots on the beam and 40 knots on the nose, depending upon which side of a ridge you're on. And I know that from personal experience. And now, not to get any questions before I move on a little bit to the Chris Parker weather forecast that I sent out. Okay. I'm not going to go through this in detail. I sent it to you, though, just to give you, there's two things I sent out today. One is a preview, sort of his first major description of upcoming expectations for the hurricane season. And he makes observations about the predictions for certain areas and why he thinks certain things might happen. And I would encourage you to take a look at that. The other thing that I sent out is an example of a daily forecast. And that one, he does 3 of them. He does one for the Eastern Caribbean. He does one for the Bahamas, and he does one for the East Coast and a couple of others, the Western Caribbean too, I guess. And so as you sign up for Chris, you can ask him to send you whatever you want to receive. As you get to the Caribbean or the Bahamas, you can choose. Just keep in mind, if you're getting that weather over a single sideband, you don't want to take more files than you can handle, because a sideband is effective, but it's very, very slow. The Iridium is not very fast either, but it's way faster than a sideband. So the thing that you want to understand as you're looking at his daily forecasts, and this is where his book comes in handy, or watching his webinars, is just understanding the lingo. And I'm not going to go through all of the details, but we can, as we get closer, for all the skippers in the group, beyond just the folks on this call, is have Chris Parker walk through. There's a lot of little shorthand things that you need to kind of get a handle on, and doing it in the middle of the ocean is not the time to do it. And another thing that I often do, I have a sideband. I don't use it for email anymore, but I do use it for listening to Chris. And I will use my iPhone to actually tape his verbal forecast so that I can either review it myself or with my crew, and try to understand what it is I think I just heard. Are there any questions about those two items that I sent out before we move on to some of your questions? Okay. Here we go.
I'm going to add just one thing about Chris
Sure.
Parker. He is, you need to have a lot of faith in him. He is very, very conservative. He is very focused on the fact that you're not out there racing, that you're out there to have a good time, and he will do whatever is possible for him to help you have a better ride. If he suggests that you, move to the east, or that you slow down, or that you speed up a little bit, or if the wind is light, he suggests, we really ought to motor until we get down past 32 north or 30 north, because we have a front coming off the East Coast, and the further southeast you are, the more mild that's going to be. I would really take that into consideration and hustle along. He's very good at this. He's done this for a lot of years. I think his written forecasts are long, and you, as Bob says, you have to interpret them. But the quicker you guys get to understand that, and the quicker you guys get in the rhythm of what he's putting out, and understand his shorthand, and understand his statements a little bit better, the better off we'll all be. And I'll end it there, and let's go to other questions, Bob.
I'd like to add one more thing to Chris, to Rick's comments, and we're really dwelling on this because there is really nothing more important on passage than understanding the weather. It can be awful, or it can be great. And I may be repeating myself. I don't think I am, but let me just give you for instance. Just a couple of examples. I was on passage in January a few years ago, leaving from Beaufort to go to the British Virgin Islands. And leaving, it sounds like a bad time of year to leave, but it really isn't, because if you pick the right window. But here I was sitting in Beaufort with my crew, and contacted Chris Parker, and he said, I think that you are going to have a good run. And here's some considerations. There's going to be a ridge that's going to be forming north and east of Puerto Rico in, I don't know, 5 days or whatever it was. But I think if you can maintain an average speed of about 7 knots, and it gets there on Friday morning or whatever it was, I think you will have about 15 knots on the beam. He said, however, if you don't, you might find yourself in a gale, and it would be behind you and not very much fun. I was fairly new to the boat at the time, and we came up a half a knot short, and the front came through 12 hours early. And instead of 15 knots on the beam, I had 4.5 days of 40+ knots on the stern with 20 to 25 foot waves. And we were fine, but it was not pleasant at all. And another brief example, not to be terrifying you, but there was, as we were coming north this spring and on the spring rally, there was people that were very anxious to get going. Everyone wants to get home in the spring for Mother's Day or whatever the circumstances might be. And we held the rally. We were originally going to leave 1st of May, and we decided we weren't going to leave until, I don't know, the 10th or something. And there was one boat that left unrelated to the rally. I just happened to have known. And Chris was talking about the weather north of a certain level. And this guy ended up off of Long Island, I don't know, 200 miles southeast of Long Island or something. And he got stuck in this low that was forecasted, but he, I guess, tried to thread the needle or something. And he was dismasted and had to be rescued by the Coast Guard. And there's other situations that occur like that. Fortunately, they're very rare. But I mention this because Chris's customer is mostly retired people. And these are people that don't want a lot of drama in their life. And I, for one, if my wife is out and we have a terrible time, it's what my kids call a career limiting move. And so we really rely on Chris. And so some people tend to maybe criticize Chris for being overly cautious, but somehow I'm never going to be too critical of Chris if he has a little less wind than he says, and it turned out to be an easier day than maybe it might have been. But if it turns out that he says it's going to be really easy and it's a gale, that's not a good thing. So using various sources is important, but Chris is good at what he does, and I would encourage that. Now, question is, can you get Chris's daily forecast on an Iridium and or Garmin inReach? Yes and no. You can get a forecast on an Iridium. You can get a forecast on through like a sat phone downloading email, or on sideband Pactor modem, but the inReach is only good for text. It's a 24 characters or whatever that is, and that's all you can get. So you need some sort of long form communication, and Tim will be talking about that during our next session. So before I get into some of the nuts and bolts questions that have come up, anybody, we've kind of covered a lot there, and I don't mean to alarm everyone, but weather is really important. Okay, enough of that. There's been a few questions that have come up both through this group and just people that have been calling me and emailing me about Hampton. You make reservations at the Blue Water Yachting Center. They're full for multi-hulls, but that's not to say they might not come up with spots later as we get further along. But you go to Docwa and register there. There are also a number of slips at the town dock that are about the same price. I think it's $2 a foot, and that's the Hampton City Dock. They're very, very nice people there. And then there may be a couple of slips available at the Hampton Yacht Club. So I encourage you to book that now because we're going to have a lot of boats. They have very, very extensive availability for monohulls, but for cats, because they take up so much room, less so. So I would do that. And that information is either on the welcome page or just you can Google it. Let's see, English Harbor. Everyone always wants to know, do I have to book an English Harbor? Yes, you should. But chances are if you just show up, they'll have a spot for you. But if we have, we already have almost 70 boats going to Antigua, we might very well fill up the dockyard. Now, having said that, there's plenty of room to anchor in Falmouth, and also not far from the dockyard in English Harbor out near the entrance. However, most boats do like to dock. It's about $1 a foot. It is very, very cheap compared to the United States. And the experience of being there lined up with another 30 or 40 salty dog boats and just chatting and having a great old time, standing and having a little happy hour off the transom, it just cannot be beat. And all of our events, all 15 or so events, will be in that very close vicinity of the dockyard. We'll have most of our events will be centered within a 10-minute walk of that spot, more often than not, even closer. So I would definitely recommend making a reservation, and you can reach out to the dockyard directly. If you have questions about that, reach out to me. I will tell you, for whatever reason, the people who take the reservations are notoriously bad at getting back to people and saying, yep, got your email. So just make sure that you let Tatcha know that you're planning to tie up in the dockyard, and then we'll send a list of those boats to make sure that everybody's ready when you get there. Another question about docking in English Harbor. Docking is done Medmore Stern 2 in English Harbor. I can tell you the first time I did that, it was pretty crazy, but it's not that hard to do. And we'll be probably, as we get closer, I'll give a little video demo of how you do it. But in a nutshell, You arrive in English Harbor. You can get in English Harbor in the dark, but you've got to pick your way in pretty carefully. I tend to go into Falmouth if I arrive in the dark, which inevitably I do, and then go over to English Harbor the next morning. It's only like a 20-minute run. But you call the dockyard, you get approval to come to the dock. People will take your lines, and you listen to the dock master on the radio. I don't know what channel it is, 11 or something. And they'll tell you about the time you should drop your anchor. And it takes probably 2 people. The way we do it is Brenda gets up on the bow and commands the windlass. We have these walkie-talkie things you wear. They're like a Bluetooth. I encourage you to get those. They call them marriage savers. And believe me, they are the best. We thought, well, we have these very elaborate hand signals, and this means steady, this means forward, this means reverse, this means turn the motor off, kind of a thing. And that worked great for about 10 years. And then one night we had to leave a harbor in a hurry, and we couldn't see each other. That didn't work real well. But the real moment that this became absolutely must have is we were Medmooring the very first time. And Brenda's up on the bow, and because the boats were pretty tight, we had to squeeze in between 2 boats. We had fenders on both sides. We let the dinghy trail off the bow. So the goal here, and we'll repeat this as we get a little further along, but I just want to tell this story anyway, because I think it's kind of fun. But so the goal here is to keep letting chain out so that the bow stays loose. And we have a bow thruster, but you don't necessarily need that. They can help you. But as we're powering down, you don't want that chain to fetch up because you can't keep moving. So the goal is to keep that chain running. So Brenda's dropping the chain, and I'm backing down, and I'm like, more chain, more chain, more chain. And she's making all these motions to me. We didn't have the ability to talk to each other. And finally, she just runs down the side of the deck and say, all the chain is in the dinghy. It's not dropping. The anchor's hanging in the dinghy. And so we had to abandon it, and we head back out again. So we had 400 pounds of chain and an anchor in our dinghy. So I encourage you to get the marriage saver. So, but anyway, when it works right, and it really is pretty straightforward, the good news is it all happens in slow motion, so you can fix yourself and power forward. But you drop the anchor, you line your stern up. It is easier with a bow thruster for sure, but you don't need that because you can ask someone in a dinghy to help you. So you just start powering down, and the person in the bow is controlling the windlass. And then you at the stern, in order to steer backwards, maybe you stern facing the stern and just steer like you would steer a car, because when you're facing backwards, now it's pretty intuitive. And then when you get close, you just throw your port and starboard stern lines to that person. They tied it up. You put the boat in gear, slow forward, and it holds you off the dock. And then you adjust the chain from the anchor to hold you off. And there's not much. There's other things that happen along the way, but it's pretty straightforward. But I've never met anybody that wasn't intimidated the very first time they did it. So stay tuned for more information. And if you have a chance, there's some really interesting videos on YouTube about how to do that.
Brought that big packet and a whole other unopened bag.
With a full keel backing up is an adventure. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. But that's where you can get someone in one of the dinghies to come out and give you a hand.
She wants it, and it squeaks if you like.
And you don't need to anchor. I mean, tie up. You can anchor. There's nothing wrong with that. Let's see.
If you go to Falmouth Harbor and anchor, you can walk over to the dockyard. It's 5-minute walk or 10-minute walk.
It is very, very close. I'm a big social guy, so I like being tied up at the dockyard, but we only stay there for a couple of weeks and then we move over to Falmouth ourselves. But because one of the advantages of being at anchor is it's easier to swim, and there's a fabulous beach over there called Pigeon Beach, and we have little barbecues or get-togethers, and it's nice to be able to just jump off the boat and go swimming in nice clear water. So. In the question also about, can we provide information on clearing in, passport, visa, testing, all of that? There are more, that's evolving somewhat, but pretty much it's back to the same old, same old. There's not any islands now that require vaccination. we require vaccination in the rally because of safety offshore, but once you get down there, if someone is vaccinated, they have pretty much free run. If they're not, they may have to go for quarantine or testing or something. But moving from island to island, this last season required an affidavit of health or something, and in some cases testing, but most of that seems to have gone away. But I'd be prepared with plenty of COVID tests rapid tests to have on board, just because if you have to pay $100 for a test, it's kind of nice to know ahead of time if you're negative before you get tested. And to that point, on the rally this north in the spring and on our rally to Maine, we had COVID outbreaks on both of them. I was talking to the infectious disease physician that guides us in our planning, and he said he has patients that have gotten the even three times in spite of vaccinations. And he did tell me that there's a new booster, which he strongly recommends. It's going to be coming out right before we leave. That should give a better job of keeping us from getting breakthrough infections. So let me talk a little bit about moving island to island. Antigua, yeah.
You wanted me to, you want to do that? You've had a medical question.
Yes, why don't you do that, Rick? Sorry, go ahead for that first.
We're going to run out of time. Having a really good medical kit offshore is very important. And you can do this in a couple of different ways. One, you can buy one from one of the companies that sell them. West Marine sells some of them. There are a number of companies that sell them these days. There are three things that I'd like to bring out about that. And the first is that I would also suggest that you get a book on first aid, something like the Wilderness Society book on first aid, so that you have some idea of what to do and how you're going to go about helping somebody. Remember that very few of us are physicians or nurses or EMTs, so we're all laymen at this, and having a book on board is really helpful. The other thing is, if you have a sat phone on board, you can get a hold of your physician at home and go through things with them, or you can subscribe to a service. But having a good medical kit on board is important. And the piece that you need to think about when you put this together is that you're going to be 5 days or 6 days away from any medical help if you're in the middle of the ocean and somebody has a major accident. And you're also going to be far enough away that the Coast Guard can't get you. And this is an uncomfortable feeling to people who've not done this before. Now, in all of the years that we've sailed, and Julie and I started sailing together and sailing offshore in the 1980s, I've only had really one experience where I had to actually use a medical kit. Knocked a tooth out because I got hit and got brushed on the head by the boom, and when my head snapped back, I broke a tooth off. And it was very comforting to be able to call my dentist and say, this is what we've got. What do we do about it? So come back to the medical kits. You want to think about having stuff in your medical kit that will help with a broken tooth like that. And you can go to a dentist and they can get you some cement or something that you can cover the end of a tooth with so that the nerve isn't always exposed. When it comes to things like antibiotics and pain medication, and we carried antibiotics and pain medication all the time, because Tylenol is good, but it's not that good if you have somebody who is seriously injured. I would strongly suggest that you go to your doctor and talk with him about it. Some doctors understand that you're going to be offshore and that you're going to be a long way away. Some doctors are sailors and understand this intuitively. Geez, the sun came out here all of a sudden, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of screwed up on my camera. There are other doctors that will say, you're not qualified, you have to go and get medical assistance. And when you say, well, I can't, they're going to look at you askance. So I would begin to put a medical kit together as soon as you can. And I would go to your doctor and tell him what you're doing and why you're going to do it, and get a limited number of opioids, anyone that he would like to prescribe for you. Very difficult today. This is much more difficult today than it was a few years ago, as you know. Sutures, pain medication, antibiotics, something for the belly button up through your lungs in case you get a cold that needs to be treated, and something that works from the belly button down in case you have some sort of intestinal bug running around on the boat. And I would get enough of that so that you can, you have some available to you when you're in the Caribbean as well. One of the things that you don't want to say to your doctor is, well, I'm going to give this to my crew, because he's going to say you have no reason to prescribe medication. But when somebody's in pain because they've dislocated a finger, or you've got a broken finger or a broken toe, you're going to do that. You're going to give them something. And if you do that, you should enter it in the log that you've done that, so that you have a permanent record of it. Prednisone is a good one. I see somebody's got prednisone here. Yeah, that works. You can take anything that you want. Tylenol with codeine works well. There are a number of things that you can go over with your doctor and explain to him why you want to do it. If your doctor does not want to prescribe this for you, don't give up. Talk to your friends who are sailors, and talk to other people who've sailed offshore, maybe from your yacht club or from your marina, and find out who they've used in the area that will help you get this. Because it's important to you to, I think, to go fully equipped.
Another thing,
The other thing that I would suggest is those of you that are going to have crew on board that you don't know, we took all of the prescription medications and put them in a small toolbox, put a lock on that toolbox, and put it up in our berth, so that we had control of it, and it wasn't somebody rummaging around in the head, running into this and deciding that it would be nice to have a little bit of a high tonight. This is an very, very important feature, is that you really want to be able to control that. And if you're going to give it to somebody, give it to them. And again, as I said, put it in a log. In case there's ever a question about it, you've got it logged. I've never had it happen, but I keep hearing about this. People go in, they check in, and somebody from customs says, have you got any medication on board? And the prescription says 22, and you show up with 20, and they say, what happened to it? You know, where are the other two? Did somebody take them? Or you're going to sell these? I've never had it happen, but if it's in the log, then that's going to be a record of it, and you're not going to have any problems with it. Sorry, Bob, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and to that point, there are services like Dan Boater, where you can get over a sat phone, you can get some medical advice. And one thing Rick didn't mention is systemic medications for seasickness. You know, a patch or a Phenergan, which is a rectal suppository. No matter how badly someone is vomiting, they cannot throw that up. And you know, everyone says, well, I really don't get seasick, but everybody gets seasick. It's just a matter of how rough it has to be. And we don't want to, we have a tendency in discussions like this to dwell on the horrifying stuff, but you know, I've been cruising for 30 years and haven't had anything really horrible happen, but you never know. Go ahead, Don.
Yeah, just a heads up on things like seasickness patches and stuff. Try them. If you've never done one, try it before you go out.
Absolutely.
I did not, and found out I was violently allergic to it, and it just about ruined my passage. So yeah, definitely make sure you're not allergic to it. Also, all prescriptions, we packed a number of days in the ditch kit before leaving to have those if necessary.
There
Yep.
was a circumstance of 3 or 4 years ago with a rally boat where one of the crew members was an organ transplant, I don't know, patient, and had an accident where his medication fell into the head, and he had like 24 hours before he was going to have a rejection problem. And the Coast Guard ended up having to airlift a new prescription out to him. So one thing you might want to consider is to Rick's point, if you don't want all your meds to be in a single bottle. I mean, just split them around so that if you do, when it's rough and you're taking something, you're tired, it's the middle of the night or whatever, and something falls in the sink, it's gone. And you don't want to have that happen. So we always ask our crew for whatever medications they're taking so that we know what they face, so that if someone happens to have, type 2 diabetes and doesn't say anything and they have a problem, we don't even know where to begin. So anyway, not to belabor that point, but Dan Boder is an excellent source of information you can get. It's only about $100 a year, and it's money well spent so that you can get real-time advice. And some hospitals have that option as well. And they have travel clinics where you can get stuff ahead of time. There are no particular vaccinations that are required for the Caribbean islands north of South America, but you might want to check in with your hospital travel clinic before you head out, just in case. Now we're getting close to the end.
John, you had a question? John Nash, did you have your hand up for a question?
No, I was actually just trying to block the sun from my.
Okay.
Scratching your head, huh?
All right. There was another question from Don about discount code for Blue Water. No, there is not. I've been having, that group just was purchased by Safe Harbor, and I have a line into the president of that company, but we've talked a couple times, but some of the things are not answered. We generally do not. It's a very busy time of year for them, so they usually don't give us a discount, although they do treat us pretty well. But just make your reservations, and if for some reason we're able to secure something special, we'll work to get you included in that. But I would make dockage, and do reach out to the people in Antigua and just let us know what your plans are. And one of the questions they ask, or one of the questions that comes up is, well, how can I book when I don't know when I'll be getting to Antigua? Don't worry about that. Give them a rough idea, say somewhere between the 10th and the 14th or whatever you think it is. And you can also email from the boat and give them an update. But as long as they know you're coming, they love Salty Dog because we're the first people that visit the island in the fall. As you make your way around to restaurants and so forth, if you're wearing a Salty Dog hat, they're going to say, oh, you're with Salty Dog, welcome to Antigua, because there's nobody there before Thanksgiving. Only the Antiguans are there. And so we are, in fact, the Minister of Tourism shows up at our events. I mean, they really love us down there. Now, before we break, are there any other questions that we have not addressed?
Bob, we talk about reservations and that sort of thing. This is going to come up. You're going to have crewmen that want to go home. Maybe you guys want to go home. And somebody's going to say, well, I want to make a reservation to come back from Antigua on such and such a day. I know it's more expensive, but you really don't want to make those reservations until you get there, because you have no idea when you're going to get there. You may be 3 or 4 days one way or the other, and you certainly don't want an airplane reservation pushing you to get in on time or to get somewhere. I know that question is going to come up, so just think about that. And your crewmen can make your crew can make reservations coming back. It's easy at that time in the year. You won't have any problems getting a reservation for people, but hold them off and tell them to make it when you get there.
The primary airlines that fly out of Antigua are JetBlue and American. And of course, this can change, but generally, if you can book a week ahead, you're golden. So what we generally do is once we get to the trades and so forth, we have a pretty good feel for when we're going to get there. We build a few extra days into the schedule because no one wants to just fly out the day they arrive, although some people have had to do that. And then we have them just email someone at home and ask them to make that reservation. And it works out very well. Or what I would encourage you to do, my crew, their better halves are flying down and they're making a reservation at the Admiral's Inn. And because there is nothing like hanging out with a bunch of people that just made a major voyage. You're part of this club, and to just jump on a plane and fly home just seems like a crime. So we do get special rates, pretty significant discount at the Admiral's Inn. And I, for one, generally, after being on the boat for close to 2 weeks, I leave crew on board and I go to the hotel. And Brenda's sitting there with her feet up on a chair waiting for me to arrive, because she usually arrives before I do. So it really gets the season off to just a wonderful start. And so to go, and when you arrive at the Admiral's Inn, the first thing they do is they say, "Would you like a rum punch?" to welcome you to them. And you get a rum punch, and it just like, welcome to Antigua. Let's see. Do most boats use a gangplank in English Harbor? That's a passerelle or gangplank to go between the transom and the dock. There's never enough to go around, but sometimes there are boards, 2x12s or 2x10s that you can just stick on your transom. I have a passerelle. You can't buy them in the United States. I have an aluminum one. I think Rick on his boat had a carbon one. His was probably like $4 or $5 grand. Mine was $700, and it was very easy to install. And it folds up and weighs about 15 pounds, and I think it's 7 or 8 feet long. If anyone's interested, they're available. You order them from France, and shipping's like $50. And they are awesome to have, and they don't take up much room. They come with a carry bag. And if you're athletic, you can just leap. The nice thing, though, is to have the stern several feet away from the dock, because it can get a little lumpy when the wind's blowing hard. But like I said earlier, having to have Brenda have to leap onto the dock, she's not the most athletic person. That's a career limiting move. So to keep Brenda happy, we have a passerelle.
I'll end with one thing. And that is, we've talked about this, and we've talked about medical kits, and I've got, 250,000 sailing miles between Julie and I, including the circumnavigation that we did and a couple of Atlantic crossings and stuff. Maybe it's 150,000. I don't know. It's a lot of miles. I've only really opened the medical kit once in all of that time to have a problem, where we had a problem, and that was 2009 or so. The other thing is that I'd like to leave you with is, we talk all about these difficulties of getting down there. When you guys get down there and somebody hands you a rum punch and says, "Welcome to Antigua," and you realize you've just made a 1,500-mile offshore passage that you've wanted to do all of your life, you're going to jump up and down for joy, because this is fun, and you're going to start a really, really nice season in the Caribbean. And for all of the discussion about weather and all of these other things that can go wrong, you really need to keep that in front of your mind. This is not all about dealing with all this tough stuff. Most of the passages are really easy, and they're fun, and you get down there and you've accomplished something that not a lot of people have done, and you really need to keep that in front of you. And I'm done for tonight. Thanks very much for your attention. I appreciate it.
And I'll leave you with a closing thought as well, and that is early on in my involvement in the Salty Dog, I was approached by someone, and she said to me, "So I get it, kind of this whole passage thing, but I really want to know what happens once I get there." And that is a whole nother discussion, and I'll be giving a presentation sometime in the next 6 weeks or so, and you'll be getting information on that, about what might a season of cruising in the Caribbean look like, starting in Antigua, working your way south, and then back north, either going directly down to Trinidad if you're going to leave your boat there, or coming back to the US and going to some of the islands and the American Virgins and so forth on the way home. Been there, done that, and that is an amazing experience. And whatever you have done in chartering or whatever, the community of boats you're going to be hanging out with, and the rainforests and the beaches and the French food and the croissants and the baguettes, and well, I'll save that for another night. So everyone have a great week, And we'll talk in 2 weeks from tonight. Tatcha will be sending out information. So I'm going to go have a
Good night,
rum
all.
punch. Everyone have a
All right,
great
thanks so
evening.
much.